Okay, my name is Karina O'Malley. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a white middle-aged woman, wears glasses, brown hair pulled back, and I'm wearing a maroon jacket and a green shirt. I'm going to talk about how to build community support and political will for safe parking programs, specifically run as service providers. I'm going to talk a little bit, and then Ben in Colorado is going to talk about his experience, and then Beverly in Wisconsin will talk about her experience in her community. And then hopefully a little bit later, Chris from Seattle will join us to talk about that innovative program we've heard about a couple times of the pump outs with RVs. Then we'll answer questions and be in conversation for as long as they let us. I will start by acknowledging that homelessness is created and perpetuated by racism, that a lack of social support for solutions is a result of racism, and much of the community's suspicion and fear of people experiencing homelessness is a proxy for racism. When we talk about where certain people can and cannot be, it always reflects our country's long history with systemic and institutional racism. I am right now sitting on unceded Coast Salish land, and I live in a community that still has racist covenants in local housing documents. I am the coordinator of the Lake Washington United Methodist Church Safe Parking Program, which is in Kirkland, Washington, just outside Seattle. We started in 2011. My church has had various outreach ministries that I got involved with, the first of which was going door to door with other folks at my church to talk to the neighbors about hosting a self-run encampment, which you can see in the picture, called Tent City 4, that would stay on church property for 3 months. There was a lot of fear and misinformation, a lot of concern, and a lot of anger. The door-to-door conversations we had really helped shape our mission and outreach. The encampment came and went uneventfully, and when we invited them back a few years later, the neighbors were much more accepting and excited, actually, to help out. We had started to build relationships based on mutual respect and trust. And the door-to-door model of communications is very powerful. It signals accessibility and respect. It allows for questions to be asked instead of festering. And I recommend, if you're going door-to-door, leaving a letter and contact information, both for those you talk to and those who don't answer the door. In 2011, Seattle passed a law saying a car with 4 unpaid parking tickets could be impounded. That was the impetus for my friend Sandy Hunt to see how this was a crisis for people living in cars. And we started just reaching out to agencies who might know people in that situation to invite them to our church parking lot. Building relationships with folks who are living in vehicles, sometimes through trusted allies, will save you so much time and effort whenever you want to offer services to folks who live in vehicles. We asked people in the congregation for money to pay for the porta potties. We asked those people that had proximity, interest, and an ability to help. We asked the community, we asked the people who came to stay with us how to do better, what else they needed, then asked our community how they wanted to engage and how they could meet those needs. This is a constant, repeating, reiterative process that produces our service model. Find a resource like our parking lot, match it to a need, or find a need like I need a gas card, and then find a resource, and then just repeat. And then, and this was key to the success of our program, we asked folks who chose not to come into our program, why not? And we tried to address those barriers and challenges. In 2013, we revamped our program entirely and made it into what it is now. We found that overnight parking did not meet the need, so we switched to 24/7. We also learned that a porta potty does not allow for teeth brushing because it has no running water. So we got volunteers to open the building in the morning and evening. And that's when the relationships started forming. The volunteers who would spend 2 hours a week hanging out had a window into meeting folks who were experiencing living in a car. And they would wonder what other resources they might have in their own home that might be useful. Or how could we invite our neighbors to engage as well? And what resources that folks living in the cars had that they wanted to offer to our community. One of our vehicle residents had a great house and pet sitting service that became the go-to for our congregation. Some had amazing gardening skills and donated food from the garden that you see here to the local food bank. Some were gourmet cooks and would cook for the entire community, or had lovely singing voices and joined our church choir. One of our former guests worked with us to start a community dinner, cooking for whoever showed up once a week. This built even more connections and sharing as folks from all different circles ended up around the same table, sharing dinner and conversation. Building community has to include the folks who receive the services you offer in a way that recognizes their strengths and resources and shows respect and dignity. Providing a low-stress way for folks both housed and unhoused to meet each other on common ground creates the most impactful web of connections. Creating a space that you can invite anyone to on equal footing, elected officials, vehicle residents, donors, neighbors, the media, make everyone sit at the same table, and it helps to have really good food. This is also, as we expanded and changed our program, it's when our neighbors started to notice that there was an increased activity and noise. They approached the city to complain, and we had a meeting. The city official offered to mediate to see if there were ways that we could work together to mitigate the impacts of the program on the neighborhood. This approach of acknowledging the problem, but working together to solve it instead of picking winners and losers was a really effective way to change the conversation that the neighbors had started about how to shut us down into how to move forward together. The city saw our value, from the Human Services Department seeing us as a very inexpensive part of the continuum of care, to the police liking to have a place to refer folks to, and the mayor and city council liking to point to us as a success, both to residents who were afraid of homeless people and those who demanded that the city do more to help. The ongoing relationship with local elected officials, with the police, with the city staff are key to having a way to address community concerns. Embedding yourself in the neighborhood means you will be in the conversation. Letters to, recently, somebody sent a letter to the local neighborhood association asking what they were going to do about all those cars on the street. It landed on my desk because I'm on the board of the local neighborhood association. And the rest of the board had constantly heard my perspective. And so I was the one who responded to that letter. So it's really key to be the neighbor, to join the neighborhood board. Unfortunately, follow next door and follow the Be Neighborly page on Facebook. Join the clubs and the faith communities, be part of the PTA, the Chamber of Commerce, the HOAs. I get tagged in next door notices and Facebook discussions when people either have a complaint, or they want to refer folks, or they just have a question. It's really disarming to listen to people in small groups and looking for common ground and acknowledging concerns. It's crucial to actually care about their concerns when they're valid. My neighbors all have a way to contact us to communicate concerns. If there's trash or noise or unsafe conditions, I listen and I respond, and I either change something or explain why I'm not going to change it. And it's the same for my house neighbors, as members of my church, and the residents in the program. We listen, we invite discussion and debate, we weigh pros and cons, and we really try to understand the pros and cons from other people's perspective. And my team makes decisions based on what we have resources for that is in the best interest of the community. I was asked to provide some statistics for my program. So our numbers dropped off significantly with the pandemic, but they're starting to inch up again. We've served between 100 and 200 folks for the last 5 years, between 20 and 40 cars at a time, typically. And just because I think it's a fun statistic, yes, we've met over 100 dogs since opening the program. And I am going to turn the mic over to Pastor Ben, who will talk about his experiences in Colorado. And Ben, do you want me to stop my screen share?
Sure. I have a few things that I'll share, not a whole lot though, but yes, absolutely. Hello, folks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Marvelous. My name is the Reverend Ben David Hensley. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a 30-ish white male with black hair, and I'm wearing a clergy collar and a black shirt. And I was asked really to sort of tell the story of Lakewood United Methodist Church in our process to start safe parking. So we started our safe parking lot, I believe, the middle of June. So we really just started this program, but it doesn't feel like we just started it, because for us in our story, we started trying to start it a lot sooner. We began exploring safe parking as a way to use a drastically underutilized parking lot on our church's property months and months and months ago. And that's when we learned about the Colorado Safe Parking Initiative, of which I believe Bill Sweeney is on the board. And so shout out to Colorado Safe Parking Initiative in particular. We are partners with them now, but when we started exploring this as an option and I began talking to whomever would listen to me, I came to learn that Lakewood, Colorado has a really strange municipal ordinance problem with safe parking and the way that they choose to interpret it. So I will share the screen of what that ordinance is, but first, let me show you the lot that we have. It's a rather small lot because we're a rather small church. We have 4 spaces that we're hoping to expand to 6 at a certain point. So that's the lot there. The ordinance was something that a city staff person shared with me in an email concerning, because they knew that we were going to start exploring this option. And so she sent this to me and said, hey, I think we have a problem here. And thank God that she did. So this paragraph that is problematic has to do with RVs and where they park. And uniquely, this ordinance, in relation to other ways in which vehicular-based homelessness is criminalized in municipalities all across the country, is this actually is a ordinance that forbids private property owners from the ways that they use their private property. So if a private property owner has a travel trailer, recreational vehicle, or camper unit on private property and it's used against the way that this particular paragraph lays out the uses allowed, then the private property owner and not the people in the RV, vice versa, get penalized. It's really interesting, actually, and it actually helped us make our case to fight against this. But the very last sentence is the problematic sentence, where it says no motor vehicle that has not been designed for occupancy may be used as a dwelling. This was really frustrating when we learned about the sentence. First of all, this sentence is like an appendix, the kind of organ you cut out and remove and you never use, and a paragraph that has nothing to do with living in your vehicle and everything to do with parking RVs on private property. And yet it's there, and unfortunately, we couldn't convince the city to interpret it differently, because cities can do that, but they chose not to. And so that began a process of me barking up any tree that I could find in the city of Lakewood to listen to me complain about this particular issue, because A, it's a poorly written sentence with a lot of undefined terms. B, it creates a problem that everyone is noticing is rising, and yet it's not the intent of that paragraph to criminalize residency and vehicles. It just does it almost by accident. And the other problematic part of this paragraph is that it's a part of the city code that's not a zoning ordinance. I had to go through this process of learning a fire hose of differentiation between different municipal codes or whatever. But this is actually considered a criminal nuisance, which means the police get involved. You get cited, you have to pay a ticket. It's not a zoning violation to which you can usually get some kind of variance if you're in a city. So what that meant for us was that there was no way for us to get around this without changing the law itself. And in the meantime, as I'm sure Bill is aware, there is a lawyer on the board for the Colorado Safe Parking Initiative who is a professor at the DU Stern School of Law, who was very helpful. She actually turned what we were trying to do in the city of Lakewood into a case study for her class. And so in the fruit of that is that she also had this language for a preliminary injunction that she emailed to me and said, hey, you should sue the city. And so we were faced with the decision of, do we sue the city because this is a violation of our practice It's the preliminary injunction has to do with this language that's found in the federal law called RLUIPA, or the Religious Land Use of and Institutionalized Persons Act. And it has to do with the way that zoning ordinances in particular affect a church's ability to practice its faith. And so that was something where this injunction was meant to make that sentence that's problematic here in the municipal code for Lakewood illegal to enforce against us as a church. But we decided, after thinking through this, that it would be a lot better if we could get the city to embrace safe parking as a legitimate and programmatic way to address homelessness. I'm aware that there is a broad spectrum of ways in which people are living in their vehicles. Our concern as a church primarily has to do with a form of homelessness that people find themselves in as they live in their cars, where they're actually kind of on a very predictable path toward more chronic homelessness. And so we were focused mostly on addressing homelessness and eradicating homelessness, not necessarily trying to provide a place for people to live permanently in their cars. And so when we brought that sentiment to our elected officials, there was some interest in figuring out a way forward. Now, I wanted it to be a simple thing where we just struck that sentence. It's a bad sentence. It just doesn't need to be there. What ended up happening, and this was a really fruitful process for us, because as a church, we canvassed our neighborhood. We did a lot of groundwork. Our congregation got together. We went to City Hall multiple times and did public comment. What ended up happening at the end of the day was that the city of Lakewood created a pilot program for safe parking that had boundaries and had limits, had reporting requirements, some frustrating things there, but at least for us, this was a process of getting the city to embrace it rather than create an adversarial relationship between our church and this work that needs to happen, particularly in our county and definitely in the city of Lakewood, and into something that the city can embrace, and made it a lot more difficult for people to rise up, pitchforks and torches and NIMBYism against it. And so we succeeded in that, and we started our program in June, and it's continuing on. The next goal for us really is to get more churches or businesses, frankly, in the city of Lakewood to jump on this pilot program. That's our story, Karina. I don't know if we just want to pass on to the next person, perhaps.
Yes, and we'll circle back to all the speakers for questions at the end. Beverly. Can you unmute, Beverly?
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, that would help. I was on a roll. So, excuse me. I was really sick the last 2 days. I'm so glad I'm feeling much better today. But I am Beverly Scow. I'm also known as Cleelagaway. I am from the Quixotanuk First Nation, which is on the West Coast in British Columbia. But I've been living in the Oneida Nation Reservation near Green Bay, Wisconsin for the past 30 years. And raising my family and my grandkids here. I am the new executive director for Wise Women Gathering Place. I've been with them since we founded. We started around Alice's kitchen table as community women wanting to help, and Alice she was a traditional home birth midwife, and she invited us to her table to learn about the gifts of home birth midwifery, and a few of us became midwives with her. But we also recognized our role. The midwives were known in our communities as the wise women. And they were never just about catching babies. They were about cradle to grave, right? Helping community and healing. People came to them for, you know, advice on herbs or how to care for their children or relationships. We grew as an organization to an organization, Wise Women Gathering Place, and really stepped into our role as community midwives. And we've been providing services to our community around healthy relationships and healing from historical trauma, providing services for people harmed by domestic violence and sexual assault. And in that journey, a big, huge barrier was always housing, right? We couldn't even get to the supportive services because you need to find a place to live, and so we reached beyond and called community, what can we do? We got a grant. We've been doing transitional living programs since 2007, and have been working on some other ways where I'm excited. We're submitting a permanent supportive housing development application this January. But while we were walking alongside a community group to open a shelter, they designated a land for the shelter, and then COVID hit, and the funds they had set aside for developing a shelter went away for a while, and then more COVID money came in, and so the shelter happened, which is good. But in that limbo time, we're like, there's a big parking lot right beside the shelter, a separate parking lot. And we'd been in our research on housing options, we'd heard about safe parking and had ordered a manual from, can you tell me, Karina, who did I get the manual from?
New Beginnings.
Thank you. Online. And we poured through that and approached the tribe who designated the land for the shelter and asked if we could do a safe parking program. And I went to our funders, victims, can we do a safe parking program? Can we use our PPP funds for this? And while it was in limbo, I called the porta potty company to see, like, what would it cost? And he says, well, we're almost out, but it costs this much. So I said, well, I'll get it. I'll get the wash station and 2 porta potties, you know, and if it all falls apart, I'll just have a month worth, right? But it worked out. Everything, the tribe said, okay. We had already been working with a number of departments because we were helping with the shelter group. So we had a relationship with the Oneida Police Department, the Health Department, the Emergency Services. And so we put together the plan that they needed for the lease to be in place. And because we were already a nonprofit, we could do the certificate of insurance. So it was like in 3 months, we launched safe parking. And our, reasoning was, the 2 weeks, most people in our community are hidden homeless where they're couch surfing. And every two weeks, they're like, on the landlord's leases, you can have a guest for up to 2 weeks. So they'd stay at their sisters or their friends and move around, which collided exactly with the transmission rate or our understanding of transmission of COVID at the time. And so we proposed, households, if they had a car, could be safer at safe parking. And it happened. We launched, and we've been busy, and we've learned a lot. We had safety monitors all night from they did request, it wasn't our choice. The tribe asked that we just do in the night, that they move during the day. If it was up to me, I would prefer to have them, all day. But so we had safety monitors through the summer all night. And we've had donations of Jackery batteries so that they could put a fan, or during the winter, electric blankets. And community have been donating gas cards. Before we launched, because of the handbook, before we launched, we read, they talked about not notifying your neighbors too far in advance where they get time to like organize themselves. So the week before we launched, I mean, it came together really quick anyways, like I didn't really have much time. But the week before we opened, I personally brought a handwritten letter from me, typed letter signed by me, to each of the neighboring businesses, maybe about 20. The location's perfect in that we had like an empty woodlot on one side, and we had a frontage road and then a highway on one side. And then our other neighbors were like industrial equipment rental, meat packing plant, and then some of the other neighbors just beyond them were like retail central offices or small business, Verlo mattress company. So I went to them and handed them a letter, and if somebody, it was COVID, so there was like, leave it a note in the door or call this number. So I talked to probably half of the owners of the companies, and then otherwise it was their front service staff, and told them what we were launching and reassured them we wanted to be a good neighbor and we wanted safety for everybody involved, and gave them my personal cell number and also the direct cell number for the safe parking monitor on the lot, so they could immediately address the concern if something happened that night, and then for me to address long-term solution to whatever may come up. So yeah, so we started and thought it was just a response to COVID, and realized we had discovered a gap in our community, an ongoing gap that needs ongoing service. PPP ended, and so we've been trying a patchwork quilt of funding to keep safe parking operating, and so that part's interesting. We are during the winter we downsized to just partial of the night coverage, and we've been up 22 cars on the lot this summer. Has been what we've been busy, and it's getting colder now, and our funding's getting colder right now, so we're going to be downsizing our coverage to a different level, and so we'll monitor and see how that goes. Plus so I don't know, that's where we're at. We're really pleased we've been able to provide safe place parking in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I think we're the only ones in the state. So we're grateful to hear from all of you and what you guys are doing and have been doing for quite a while. And I don't know, was there anything else you wanted me to share? I think we talked, Karina, about unexpected neighbors or unexpected
allies and unexpected challenges.
So right, we're located right beside a shelter that is open and operating, and I was seeing information about trends to try and set up your safe parking program and a relationship with the shelter, and hopefully we'll get there, but there's been some resistance to us having safe parking program, and so we're doing our best to respect that. I mean, we're just down the road. Our agency, Wise Women Gathering Place, is a service provider agency, and we have resources, advocates who come. We do an intake, and we have advocates who come on site and help connect them to whatever resources that they're in need of. And we've an exciting one is the churches. One in particular, was like heard about us and wanted to get gas cards, and was so excited about $100 worth of gas cards he got from his congregation last year, and we were so appreciative because it all helps make a difference. And this year he went to the congregation and was hoping to get $300, and he got $3,000 this year.
Wow.
So they, and then an individual parishioner came with like blankets and socks. And so I'm excited about this growing awareness and community connection and momentum that is happening. So I'm excited about that. And when we started, the meat packing guys would come over to our safety monitors and ask about it, and you know, just were really supportive. When I went to door to door.
I'm so sorry
No,
to
that's
interject.
okay.
I would love to come back to you, but I do want to give about 5 minutes to Chris Wilkerson, who's
Yes.
here to talk about his pump out program.
Sorry, I talked too long.
No, you don't. We should have had a whole session just for you, Beverly.
Oh, goodness.
Chris,
Yeah, I
go
agree. Beverly, very inspiring, and your passion obviously comes through. My 5 minutes is going to be a pretty different discussion because I do not run a safe lot. My work is centered around trying to provide some stability and hygiene resources for people that are living in RVs on the right of way. So these are people that don't have permission to park there, but they're there. And the message, the thesis of what I'm trying to get across the next 5 minutes is about using data to drive the basis of your intervention, if anyone wants to try and model this. So I tried to share a screen. You guys should be able to see a little graph, little blue line. Is that coming through? Let's see.
No, not yet.
No. Okay, let's try again. There we go. Is that now coming through?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, we can
Yes.
see.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this little graph here shows you the trend line for spills of sewage that the spill response team had encountered on the streets of Seattle. We had been hovering under 20 for a very long time. As the population had grown, those numbers were increasing a lot. We had also gotten much better at looking for them as we had realized it was a problem. And so we were proactively going to RV encampments and you know, what's going on in the drains here. Each one of these numbers, each one of these spills that represents thousands of dollars of cleanup costs to the city, represents a public health threat, represents a person who doesn't have a safe way to dispose of their waste or a dignified place to use the bathroom. They all represent a challenge. Then we realized we were responding really reactively to that. Find a spill, clean it up. So we wanted to test and pilot, could we be proactive instead? Could we go get the waste from the RV, empty it for them so that there was no risk to spill? Once the waste was successfully managed, would that spill? Could that spill happen? And we've been very successful. I'm sorry I don't have the next few lines on the graph, but it basically has plunged back down, and we're now back to below 20 spills per year, mainly very small ones, drips, and rather than dumps. And the point that I want people to take away with is that providing the service from a compassion-based argument, while that might be worthwhile, and I value people making that judgment, here we were going from a different argument. We were able to nuts and bolts and say, we're spending $250,000 a year on spills. What if we spent $250,000 on providing hygiene service? And we did, and it worked. So we were able to transform a cost into a productive benefit. And so what do we actually do? So we provide free pump out services. We partner with a charity called St. Vincent de Paul, nationwide charity. They help us locate people that need service. We meet up in the morning, we drive around, we contract with a vendor. Here's a picture of that vendor set up. You can see we got a hose connected to an RV. We actually suck out the waste. I think you can see me, the little orange blob in the reflection there. And the whole operation happens in the street, happens in the right of way. So we're visible to the public. The public sees what we're doing. They're able to, you know, have opinions about it. We put a lot of emphasis in safety because this does have inherent risks to it of spills and contact with sewage and being in the street and everything like that. Since we're paying a vendor, there is a cost for this. My understanding is those vendor costs vary tremendously across the country, depending on what labor costs and stuff like that in your jurisdiction. But we are now doing roughly 130 or so, 140 of these per month. We're maintaining wastewater services for somewhere around 600 families living on the streets of Seattle. And we've fine-tuned a lot of details about that, the frequency of service. And we're still trying to gather data as we go, because we know that data is going to inform other services we want to do. And so that's the last side. So we ask people about other things that are related to, I work for Seattle Public Utilities. I'm technically part of the utility. My role was related to pollution, but the utility also has responsibility to providing water and garbage service for the city. So we ask them about water and garbage service. This graph here shows that water insecurity is really high. Over a third of the people self-report that they're stealing water to, finding a hose in the neighborhood. So I'm using this data to then try and justify the next step. Let's set up a water supply program so that we can mitigate the externalities from the encampment, stealing water, breaking fire hydrants, all those other problems that the entire community is impacted by, and then be able to hopefully illustrate the cost of that problem, compare it to the cost of an intervention, like delivering water to people at encampments, and use that cost difference to justify the intervention to the local government. And we were able to do that with the wastewater service to get funding from the state government as a water quality framework, a water quality grant, basically, rather than competing for very vital dollars for things like safe parking lots and shelter and stuff like that, and instead tapping into resources related to pollution. So that's in a nutshell what I wanted to talk about, and I'm happy to talk about questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Chris. That was wonderful. It was really interesting. And thank you so much to Ben and Beverly as well. I have learned so much, and I wish I hadn't taken up so much time because I didn't learn anything from myself. We do not have a lot of extra time, but is there a question from the chat, Graham, that you want to?
Yeah, we have a whole bunch of great questions from the chats, and again I want everyone to carry your questions over as well into our chats tomorrow. But we have a question. We have a couple questions. I'm just going to pick one as I think the last one because it's a good question from Bill Sweeney. Do you only serve those who are legally parked, or do you exist in tension with the parking law? So how do you work around with people and the legal parking?
Am I muted? I'm struggling with my
Yep, we can
interface
hear
here.
you.
Okay, so I service anyone who I have authority to be on the land. So really, I only hit a barrier when someone's parked on private property and I don't have a formal arrangement with that property owner. But if they're in the street, I have full authority to work in the street as a city utility worker. And so we really have as low a barrier as possible, because we know if I say no, that's, in my mind, that's a spill waiting to happen.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Please.
If a local parking provider, a safe parking program, was to want to work with you, would you and was to give you permission to come onto their site, do you think that you guys would be able to work with them?
So I would consider it, but I honestly don't. I question whether this type of mobile service is the right model for a safe lot, primarily because of cost. So we are paying roughly, when you add our staff time, around $250 per service. So, and that provides wastewater service for a month for an individual or a small family. And when you compare that to the cost of a porta potty or a direct sewer discharge, it's a lot higher. So I think this model is really a better fit for stabilizing encampments that aren't authorized, rather than to serve an encampment that does have authority to use other less cost interventions.
Thank you, Chris. Great answer. Karina, the floor is all yours.
Oh, okay. Any other questions from the chat?
Well, we're actually at 1 minute over the 45-minute mark. We might be able to maybe answer one more, but people are going to start moving back into this chat room soon, I'm sure.
Oh, all right.
You,
I will just.
you have some time over here. They're still wrapping up in the breakout room.
Okay.
Chris, if you want to stop sharing, I'll put up my takeaway slide. See if I can do that. There we go. Yeah. Okay. And yeah, I had asked Beverly to highlight, but of course you have to go where the story takes you, Beverly. But when we had talked earlier, Beverly had told me that yeah, the meat packer guy was like, yeah, how can I support? And then the person running the homeless shelter next door had a problem with residents of safe parking coming over and playing basketball or something.
It was really disappointing and confusing. You know, there's just different philosophy of approaching to providing services there. So so we don't have many families that come on a lot, but when they do, we you know, we're looking for resources for them quickly. Also, we're everything we're required is just temporary. We're not allowed any like RVs or trailers, campers on a lot. It has to be a vehicle, so it can be a van or a car. So there's not a lot of room for families. And it was interesting, when I went and did the door go around, I did get a call from, he runs a Subway, but he's also an elected representative on a county supervisor. And so he was the only one who called me, and we talked, and I explained everything that I explained to the others when I got a chance to talk to them door to door. And when we talked, I just, reassured him. And, you know, he didn't have any other concerns. So there was some that were like telling me that there's people sleeping in the woods, and that the people set up porta potties over across the lot to support the people living in the woods. And I said, well, I ordered the porta potties because we're setting up the safe parking program. So it's interesting how rumors and talking amongst business owners in an area can happen. But yeah, so we haven't had any real problems with any of our new neighbors. We've got really good, one of our safety monitors is on this session, and they just do such a great job of being present and supporting the parkers who have a whole range of needs, and they're there to help them. And you know, they take care of the lot, and they take care of the people that are on the lot in a really good way.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of our presenters for joining me today, and hopefully y'all can email me if you have any more questions for me or the other presenters. I can pass along those emails if you want. It's just been such a pleasure being here today. Thank you.
And I also want to thank you all. This was such an amazing session, and the last session was too. I don't want to definitely throw anyone under the proverbial bus, but there's so many puns. I'm sorry, but this was just wonderful. I appreciate you sharing about the work you're doing. Beverly, your program is wonderful. I appreciate you telling us all about it. Karina, obviously, you know, you and I go way back, and I love the work you do. I really appreciate you sharing about how communities can get involved. That last slide you had was just wonderful. So your takeaway slide, you had so much great information. And Chris, you know, I love the program you do. Thank you so much for educating people about that work. What you're doing is such an innovation that communities across the country could learn from. And I really think that there's an opportunity here to take the work that you're doing and carry it into places where people haven't even thought about doing this kind of work, and it could just make such a difference. So really, thank you for the work you do, and thank you for presenting on it here today.